Welcome to Power Summit 2023.
Finance Minister, Ministry of Finance, Government of Nepal. Thank you, sir, for being a part of this event and this session. We'd also like to invite our keynote speaker, Mr. Mahaprasad Adhikari, Governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank. We'd also like to invite our moderator for this session, Mr. Ramkrishna Khatiwada, CEO, Nepal Infrastructure Bank Limited. We'd also like to invite Mr. Bhanu Pokhrel, Group MD, Urja Developers Limited. We'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Srijesh Gimire, Chief Investment Officer of NMB Bank. We'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Vidya Bharati Sigdil, Investment Director, Dolma Impact Fund, to join this eminent panel. We'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Jason Pelma, Infrastructure New Business Manager, IFC. We'd also like to invite on stage Ms. Anupa Rimal Lamichane, Regional Manager, Asia Pacific Green Climate Fund. We'd also like to invite on stage Ms. Namrata Mukherjee, Deputy Chief of Party, USAID, South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, on stage to kindly join this panel. So ladies and gentlemen, this particular session in the Power Summit 2023 will be shedding some light on the availability of financing for power projects in Nepal, with a particular focus on the role of domestic banks in funding hydropower projects. Experts from the private sector will also be providing their perspective on financing, and the session will explore ways to mitigate risk and encourage foreign investments. So without any further delay, may I please hand over the proceedings of this session to Mr. Ramkrishna Khatiwada, CEO, Nepal Infrastructure Bank Limited.
Namaste, good morning. Thank you, Satishaji, and organizer for having me and giving me an opportunity to moderate this session on financing, resource mobilization, structuring, and investment in power project. So, after a long discussion on the generation, transmission, trade, green hydrogen, energy transition, cross-border regional integration, we are now moving to the real topic, which is money or financing or investment. Today, with these esteemed panelists and personalities, we try to find out the solution on to how to target of becoming green energy hub and really materialize our dream into reality of broadening energy, green energy market. For that, we need to invest not only in generation, transmission, trade, distribution infrastructure, as well as market enabler like green hydrogen, industrial infrastructure, electric transportation, electric cooking. The required quantum of investment is quite high. So it will be in the range of the 40 to 50 billion, and you can take any number because we do have the ample gap for the infrastructure investment in the power sector. So today we'll discuss and hear from the government side, regulator, financial institution, developers, private equity, multilateral, and expert on how to generate that quantum of financing, resource mobilization, source of funding, alternative financing, and the structuring. To start with, I would like to request Mr. Mahaprasad Adhikari, Governor of Nepal Rashtra Bank, to deliver his keynote speech.
Thank you, Ramkrishna ji. Session Chair, Honorable Finance Minister, Dr. Prakash Sharan Mahat, fellow panelists, distinguished delegates, participants, media friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to be here as part of the Power Summit 2023. Let me begin by extending my gratitude to the organizer, Independent Power Producer Association of Nepal, IPAN, Minister of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation, and also the Investment Board Nepal for organizing this summit and bringing us together to discuss a global shift to green energy and also potential of Nepal, which I think is a very highly pertinent issue today. There is perhaps no debate that the hydropower development has the potential to become an important growth catalyst in Nepal. It has the potential to increase domestic income, lower real domestic energy prices, alleviate poverty, and provide protection against rise in oil prices. A study by Asian Development Bank shows that realizing merely 20% of our economically viable hydropower potential in Nepal could almost double our GDP by 2030. It is my pleasure to share that we have succeeded in addressing the problem of severe power cuts in the past and have started exporting electricity. Regarding the potential domestic use of energy in the future, the energy demand forecast shows that with the reference of case of economic growth of 7.2%, the demand for electricity will reach about 30,000 megawatt by 2040. Realizing the potential of the power sector, the government of Nepal has placed top priority on energy sector development for achieving high and sustained growth and creating a foundation for Nepal to graduate to an upper middle income country by achieving the SDGs. The long-term vision 2100 has a target of producing 40,000 megawatt of electricity and raising the per capita electricity consumption to 3,500 kilowatt per hour. The 15th plan has a target of producing 5,820 megawatts of electricity by the end of 23-24. In this regard, Nepal Rashtra Bank also came up with a number of specific policy provisions to gear up investment in energy sector. Some of the initiatives in this respect includes provision for commercial banks to disburse at least 10% of their loan portfolio to energy sector, which was introduced by 2077 monetary policy. Provision for external commercial borrowing for the banks to mobilize foreign financial resources to hydropower development. External commercial borrowing cannot be further disbursed for consumption and trade financing. It should go for capital formation like hydropower development or other production-oriented project. Considering the soundness of Nepalese financial sector, we are experiencing encouraging interest from foreign financier to our financial institution. Another step taken by Nepal Rashtra Bank is establishment of infrastructure bank, whereby Mr. Ramakrishna is the CEO right now. It is also established in order to provide financing to large infrastructure projects, including hydropower. Exception also placed in place with respect to single obligor limit, whereby banks can provide up to 15% of their core capital to hydropower project and transmission lines. In normal cases, the single obligor limit is only 25% of the core capital. We also issued a guidelines on environmental and social risk management, ESRM, for banks and financial institutions to mitigate the environment and climate-related risk and promote financing to green energy sector. We are also permitting and encouraging banks for issuing energy bonds to mobilize additional required resources. We allowed bank for interest capitalization of the grace period for the loans provided to energy industry. There may be issue that banker may putting in place with respect to these new directives, but Nepal Rashtra Bank is very much keen to facilitate on any issue with respect to financing to hydropower projects. Provision to limit maximum of 1% premium only 1% premium to loans provided to export-oriented and reservoir-based hydropower projects. SIC unit refinancing during COVID-19 and provision to classify loan up to 30 million to small hydropower as deprived sector lending. Despite several opportunities, potentialities and policies provision at hand, realizing the full gain from the sector has not been an easy task for us. The installed capacity has just crossed 2,650 megawatt, which is about 6% of the economically potential. And its direct contribution to GDP is about 1.4% only. One of the issues in realizing the power potential in the country could be financing issue. According to a study by the World Bank, Nepal needs to invest an average of 1.3 to 2.1 billion annually to invest between 2018 to 2050, totaling almost $56 billion in order to fulfill the demand for electricity under the reference case growth scenario of 7.2%. Regarding the sources of financing, Nepal's hydropower development has heavily relied on state financing. During 2010-17, about two-thirds of the investment came through Nepal Electricity Authority and its subsidiaries. Institutional investors such as Employee Provident Fund, CIT, and insurance companies occupied about a fifth of the debt, and equity financing in hydropower investment. However, in recent years, the role of private investor and joint venture investment is very much encouraging and increasing. In this respect, the debt financing from the commercial bank occupies about 4%. Such financing stood at 262 billion in mid-January 2023. Even though resource mobilization from the public through capital market is very limited in Nepal, growth of such financing is also encouraging. The number of listed companies has increased to 65 compared to 37 2 years ago, and the share of hydropower companies, the listed company means hydro-related, energy-related. Hydro companies in capitalization has increased to 14% compared to 6.7%. However, resource mobilization from the bond market is still in the early stage. Another potential source of financing for the energy sector is foreign investment. Even though FDI in the sector is increasing, it is quite low compared to the potential. As per the FDI survey by Nepal Rashtra Bank, the FDI stock in electricity and gas sector stood at rupees 70 billion in 2021, which is about 31% of the total FDI stock in the country. The role of multilateral agencies is equally important. Given the evolving nature of the financial market, I think the tapping capital markets will be one of the most promising long-term options for financing small to medium private hydropower projects. Local authorities, along with the community participation under the federal structure, can add strength to mitigate the financing gap and address practical hurdles and ensure sustainability of such projects. Secondly, the blended finance and intra-venture initiatives of the international institutional investors, such as IFC, are critical to provide essential support at the early stage of project development. For small-scale hydropower projects, equity as well as debt financing from domestic resources and project financing can be some of the viable options. However, for large-scale and export-oriented hydropower projects, foreign resources with the participation of state and public seems to be one of the most viable and promising options. So we are focusing on mobilizing resources from such windows to realize the potential of this sector. Let me conclude by restating the fact that the hydropower can be the most important growth catalyst for Nepal, and thus promoting financing for the sector is our topmost priority. While domestic financing can be encouraged for a small hydro project, we encourage additional foreign financing for the large and export-oriented project. With our due focus on this sector, we can benefit from the global shift to green energy and provide clean and sustainable energy to our citizens and also benefit from its export potentials. Let me stop here. I thank you all for contributing to this discussion. I believe that the insights shared in this summit will contribute for the development of clean and sustainable sources of energy and ensure a better future for all of us. I wish the summit a great success. I also wish our foreign delegates and participants a pleasant stay in Kathmandu. Thank you. Thank you for your kind attention, everyone.
Thank you, respected Governor, sir, for your insightful keynote speech. And as you rightly pointed out that, and we all are witness that with the directive lending provision and the different initiative taken by NRB, Nepal IPP has really flourished, and now the generation pie of Nepalese IPP reached 54%, and it is continue going. So coming to the next part of the session, so Honorable Minister for Finance do have other commitments, so I will be slightly rescheduling or orienting the program. So first of all, I'd like to request Honorable Minister of Finance to deliver his remarks, and I would also touch upon some issue, especially infrastructure project require the huge capital investment, and which require the basically we have to make the fiscal affordability and the viability to make the private sector to come in the picture. So in this context, considering the reduced fiscal space, worsening macroeconomic imbalances and inflation and the other parameter, we have to have the private sector in the transmission sector, in the distribution sector, as well as trade part, and for that we need to have the government or Ministry of Finance support and in terms of the hedging mechanism, in terms of the tax incentive, in terms of the blended finance. So I'd like to request Honorable Minister for Finance, Dr. Prakash Saran Maut, to give his remarks.
Thank you very much, Governor Sam, and participants in the dais and in the floor. Thank you very much for inviting me in this very important event. As you know, Nepal has traveled a lot. We started with few Nepali investors, private sector investors in the 1990s with 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, 5 megawatt type of projects. When we opened private sector participation in 1990, we have hardly any basis, only few projects under state sector that also supported by our friendly countries. We didn't have much. When we started letting private sector to invest in power, especially hydropower, Nepali investors has done a tremendous job. I salute them. Now they are aiming at more than 200 megawatt, even 300 megawatt on their own. We are also very open to international investment from multilateral donors participation as well as bilateral. And we are also very much eager to bring private investment in Nepal. We know that Nepal has tremendous potential in hydropower sector, and we have also established good institutional mechanism to start with. Now, for bigger project, we have Nepal Investment Board that is looking into prospective investors. Recently, we have decided to support and give those projects who are in different stages of development so that they can go ahead. And there are more prospective investors, and we'd like to see they participate in Nepal's hydropower development. As we all know that hydropower sector is a very capital incentives sector, so our own resources is not sufficient. Therefore, I like to invite all the investors who are interested in investing in Nepal. Nepal government and finance ministry will do everything possible to facilitate your investment in terms of concession, in terms of tax incentives, tax exemption. We are ready to work with foreign as well as domestic investors. We have now surplus energy during wet season. We have even started to export. That is the good news. But during dry season, still we have problem. We have deficit. So we like to see investors coming in reservoir-based project as well to meet our own needs as well as to export outside Nepal. As far as this power purchase agreement is concerned, I think based on our own requirement, we are ready and Power Ministry is ready to sign power purchase agreement. But for the bigger project, I think we have to make sure that we have this export mechanism to be explored fully. So with India, we have agreed to have this mechanism. We need to take it further. At the same time, Bangladesh is a big market, and we are also working towards that. With this power trade agreement in place, I think not only in Nepal, investors will be able to make sure that their power can be exported in India as well as Bangladesh. So we want to see investment coming in this reservoir project. World Bank and ADB has already shown interest in developing 2 power projects. And there are more in the pipelines. I think those investors who are looking for bigger project, they can look into this reservoir project as well. We wanted to go green, our transportation sector and household, including cooking. So that will also increase the domestic demand. Greening our economy and also moving from the fuel-based transportation to electric-based transportation is our priority. Now, this cost of electric vehicles has come down. So I think Nepali are already taking great interest in using electric-based vehicles. In coming days, we want to make sure that we'll be able to replace all those fossil fuel-based transportation system to electric-based transportation system. That will also increase demand for electricity in domestic sector. At the same time, to reduce the dependence of this gas for domestic use, we want to go electric in that areas also. That will also increase our domestic demand. It will do 2 things. In the one hand, our import bill will go down. We have big trade deficit. At the same time, when we have greater generation capacity, we will be able to export and earn foreign exchange. That way, we want to reduce this trade deficit greatly in the future. Therefore, I think for Nepal, this hydropower sector is a priority sector. So, because this is a power sector is a priority sector, we are ready to give incentives, and also we'll look into what are the hurdles or obstacles or problems that investors are facing, who are ready to review. And if there is more we can do, we are ready to do that. We are open. We know very well making it restrictive and making it more costly will only lead to less investment. If we have less investment, we will not be able to earn. If we don't earn, then our tax basis will not increase. And we will not have bigger revenue. So just only by taxing, you will not increase your revenue base, because sometimes we are worried about revenue, especially when you are finance minister, we are always thinking in terms of how to raise revenue. But we should not forget that increasing revenue does not come from just increasing taxes. It will rather reduce in so many ways. Therefore, whatever tax provision or other incentives provision that we have right now, if there is a need for changes, we are ready to do that. We like to see more and more investment. Nepali private sector, Nepali diaspora, foreign private investors, and multilateral participation of multilateral agencies, and also bilaterally, we also like to see this state participation like we have seen in Arun III. They have worked well, and now they are telling me that next year they will be able to generate power. So that's a good thing. But as far as foreign private sector is concerned, we have some problems. We have GMR, the Satluj and GMR, we have awarded these two projects at the same time. Satluj, now they are ready to generate by next year. GMR is still struggling. The financing is the major problem. So I think in future, if we can bring some of the private bigger actor in Nepal and they successfully do the project, that will pave way to more private sector participation from outside for the bigger project, because that will give some positive signal, okay, it can be done. We can do it in Nepal. Of course, there are several private sector actors who are participating in small and medium-sized hydropower project, and that's a good thing. But we like to see bigger project. But bigger problem is transmission line. That is one serious concern investors have. Also, we are also very serious about it. In the past, we have violent conflict and instability, this and that. Because of that, many transmission projects didn't go well. But now, we are very serious about it, and we like to see that all those cross-border transmission line, proposed transmission line, as well as domestic transmission line, we like to see that expedited. And of course, we have to work with local government and provincial government in this regard. We need to create an enabling environment so that this transmission project can be fast-tracked. We'll also like to see this investment, private sector participation in transmission line project as well, because it's quite capital intensive, and one source of, capital will not be enough. So major problem that we are seeing right now is how to make sure that we have power generation at the same time transmission line. Otherwise, we have power but no mechanism to, evacuate. So our biggest priority right now is strengthening and fast-tracking transmission line projects. So this is the general situation. Because now we have quite a bit of experience, you can also look closely to those investors who have successfully invested and also already generating power. You can also, look at their experience. Based on that experience, I think you can also chart your own path to work in Nepal. Now, Nepali investors also ready to partner with bigger external investors. So I think that will be a big plus, because Nepali private sector, a large number, I will say, they have already worked and produced results. They have experience, and they know how to navigate. So I think that will be a big plus. And I think joint venture project with Nepali partners will do a wonder. So all those who are here from different parts of the world, on behalf of Nepal government and on behalf of Finance Ministry, I will assure you that Nepal is giving, Nepal government is giving, no matter who comes into power. They are given first priority to hydropower, because that is the potential sector to transform Nepal's economy. So we will support whatever way that is required. Of course, there are infrastructure, road gaps. We are also working towards that, so that you don't have to invest much on creating this road infrastructure to reach your place of investment. So we already have basic roads all over the country. Of course, we don't have good road yet in all parts of the country, but we are also investing a lot in this sector, so that your investment cost to go down. So at the end, I'll again welcome you and also invite you to participate in developing Nepal's hydropower sector. Let us make it win-win for you as investors and as the Nepali, for win-win for Nepali people. I wish this Power Summit will come up with a number of suggestions and number of conclusions, and we'll also look into those suggestions and conclusions, and I assure you we'll do everything possible to make sure that your concerns and questions are addressed. Thank you for inviting me, and because of my work, I'm not able to be here for full time. Sorry for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister for Finance, for your valuable insight on the sector and government commitment toward the private sector development and bringing private sector in terms of the concession, in terms of the tax incentive, bringing enabling environment for the transmission infrastructure as well as larger hydropower project development. Once again, thank you very much, Honorable Finance Minister. Thank you.
We understand the work obligations the Honorable Finance Minister has, and hence thanking him for his time and for chairing this session as well. May I please invite on stage the President of IPAN, Mr. Krishna Prasad Acharya, to kindly present this token of appreciation from the organizers' side to Honorable Dr. Prakash Sharan Mahad, Finance Minister, Ministry of Finance, Government of Nepal, for his valuable inputs in this session, as well as his presence encouraging all the stakeholders that are present in this Power Summit. We'd like to thank Honorable Minister and present this token of appreciation. माननीय मन्त्रीज्यूलाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद आजको यस कार्यक्रममा आए हामीलाई साथ दिनुभएकोमा. I would now like to hand over the proceedings of this session back to our moderator.
Thank you. अलिकति बढाउनु पर्यो. Thank you, Sadhya ji. Now we move to panel discussion, and we do have prominent panelists from the different sector, from financial sector to private equity to the green financial institution to industry export and multilateral institution. So first of all, I would like to start from Bhanu Pokhrel sir, Group MD, Urja Developer, who will be covering on the availability of the financing in Nepalese power sector. Obviously, the availability of the financing in Nepal for the power sector has always varied depending on the various factors such as government policy, economic condition, investment climate, and more specifically project-specific characteristic, and ultimately evacuation and the market. So we witnessed in the past that even to finance 20 megawatt project, we had to form a consortium of 20 banks. Now the energy sector dynamics have changed and moved to the larger project, including peaking storage and the storage project, a transmission line, energy market, energy transition, and the ESG are the many other emerging issues. So in this context, how do you, as a developer, see the power sector financing and the investment scenario in the coming days? That is one question. And the second question is, in your experience in the sector, what are the major sources of the investment coming in the power sector? What are the investor, local as well as international prerequisite for investment, and how are you working on it? Over to you, Bhanu sir.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. I think I will start with the key points surrounding the financing issues of Nepalese power sector. It took almost 107 years for us to achieve that 1 gigawatt target, while the government of Nepal envisioned in 2018 for development of 15,000 megawatt in 10 years' time. If you look at the past years, I think it was April again. So almost five years, we have come almost halfway. Another 1,500 megawatt capacity addition has been there in 5 years. This is a very good, very encouraging thing for us. And there is a significant contribution of the private sector in achieving these targets. If we look from a little different perspective, this 1,500 megawatt is just 10% of the 15,000 megawatt. And we are left with 5 or let's say 7 years' time. So there is no option other than to accelerate to achieve this 15,000 megawatt target. This is one side. On the other hand, so far the investment, there is 262 crore investment in private sector, Governor sir just mentioned. So we need to invest almost 20 times to realize this 15,000 megawatt over the next 5 to 7 years. Do we have that capital? I think this is the key issue. Today, the installed capacity is 2,650 megawatt, and some 3,000 megawatt capacity, various projects they are under implementation, under construction stage, of which almost 2,600 megawatt from the private sector projects. So can the Nepali bank, do they have the appetite to fund? I think we'll have an answer from our colleague from bank. And there is a long list of power projects where almost 7,000 megawatt projects are waiting for PPA to be signed. They are in the waiting list. So how this, what would be the fate of these projects? And moreover, total 8,700 plus megawatt generation license has been awarded, and almost 12,400 megawatt capacity survey license has been awarded. So that again, aggregates to 21,000 plus megawatt, and 14,000 megawatt solar capacity is also there in the pipeline waiting for investment. Where, we manage this fund from, so I think we need to have a holistic approach to meet the growing financing demand in this sector. The next question would be, what would be the tune of financing requirement to realize, let's say, this first 15,000 megawatt? The Nepal government or the energy ministry is yet to consolidate the figures, and we don't have an official figure what is the actual funding requirement in terms of generation, transmission, and distribution to manage this 15,000 megawatt. But referring to different studies by World Bank, IFC, or this USAID startup program, it will be something somewhere between 2 to 3 billion investment per year. And if we consider a 70-30 generous, finance debt equity thing, so where this $2.1 billion will come every year, and how do we manage almost 900 million equity fund? I think this is other critical issues. So this scenario would basically suggest a situation where we have to focus on foreign investment. But what are the challenges for getting foreign investments? So I was just jotting down some of the issues, and I have 3 pages of issues. I think many of us are already aware of that. And having, listening to the Honorable Minister, his very powerful remarks and the commitment to provide incentives, to provide the hurdles. So I think I'll just focus on a very few issues. And I think we have to deep dive to the problems. And we already have a commitment from the government of Nepal to address this problem. So this could be a very good, I think, point for us to talk about foreign investment. One of the challenges would be, our limited technical capability and bankability of the DPR that we will be preparing, and our project management and O&M poor practices are there. And the other issue will be the ESG compliances. How do we practice the ESG standards, and how do we comply with that? Will be a challenge, especially for the private sector as well. And how to get the blended finance. Hedging is another issue that we'll be talking about. And Nepalese bank, they are operating with short-term funds. So there is what would be the capacity of the local banks. And there are certain issues related to the PPA, the flat tariff structures. And PPA revision has not been done for last, several years. A flat tariff for all kind of structure in a particular, let's say, ROR capacity, and that is not a scientific way of, and the other hurdles and challenges will be the regulatory and approval processes. How to bring alternate investment fund, AIF and SIFs, and we don't have a policy to my knowledge. We have only one instrument, that is the equity instrument. How do we, realize that this instrument in terms of from a policy standpoint, that will be another challenge. Now, I think I would like to share one experience that my company, Urja Developer, we are working together with IFC on bringing investment in hydropower through some innovative instrument. So if we start talking about the challenges, I think it will take long, and we discussed at one point, and IFC, they considered a situation where the major concerns with us, the first was the USD fund, because of hedging and the cost, what would be the cost of fund, and second thing was the ESG compliances. So they supported us with the NPR-based instrument, and it's a blended finance, climate funds, and the commercial loan, and it will be some kind of mezzanine kind of instrument. And this, in parallel, we get support for the ESG capacity building as well. So we are in a position to put forward this proposal for approval, and it's my honor that our governor sir is with us, and he will take this thing positively, and at least we'll have some instrument in place to realize the foreign investment together with IFC support. I think I will state yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanu sir. Yes, you rightly pointed out that to achieve the target of 15,000 megawatt, we need to have the holistic and the integrated approach, as well as we need, in terms of the source of the financing, we need to have all sort of the financing, not only mainstream equity and debt financing, but also the alternative financing, including the different kind of the structure project, green bond, green financing, or similar kind of the structure. So from developer to financial institution, I'll be moving to Srijesh Kimire, who is Chief Investment Officer of NMB. So Nepal has an ambitious target to achieve the power generation capacity through the mix of the ROR, PROR, storage, and even alternative source of solar power. So Nepalese financial institution sector always has been a paramount enabler in the development of the sector, and it has already invested around 300 billion and a commitment of another 200 billion Nepalese rupees. Considering the ongoing PPA of new project of around 3,000 megawatt of the PROR project and 1,500 megawatt of the ROR project, which itself require around 650 billion Nepalese rupees for those financing. So in this context, how Nepalese financial sector is prepared to finance these projects, and does the sector have the appetite for that quantum? That is one. And if not, what could be the approaches, modality, and alternative arrangement? So I'd like to request Srijesh ji to conclude his remarks in 5 to 7 minutes, considering the time frame. So even I'd like to request other panelists also to concise their remarks as much as possible. Over to you, Srijesh.
Thank you, Ramkrishna. In fact, it's a big honor to represent the banking fraternity, not only NMB, as Nepal's banking fraternity in this August forum, in presence of Governor. So, well, let's draw back, or let's go back around 10 years back, where closing a 25 megawatt project used to be a challenge in the banking, through the banking sector. So today, we've already displayed that almost 100 megawatt project through the financing of Nepalese banks has already come into operation. And most of the developers here today we see, and they're looking into, or they're eyeing into the projects of 150 or 250 megawatts. So as the time goes by, the Nepalese banking diaspora has displayed that they're capable enough to, to finance the projects of the national commitment. Going into the figures of 650 billion, where, either way, however we form this equation, whether say by 2027, I just slightly staged to 2030 as a nationally determined our commitments, contribution commitments, where looking at today's policy mandate of credit growth of around 12%, we'll be reaching almost around 9,000 billion worth of credit books of the banking, which is roughly around $70 billion. Now going forward, to meet that, as a 10% of the regulatory mandated portfolio that banks need to do, somewhere around, we need to raise around 650 billion, which corresponds to Ramkrishna's figure. Also with the 4,500 megawatt that we are targeting for, roughly around 20 crores as like per megawatt per se. So somewhere again, it corresponds to more or less the same figure. So 650 billion in 6.5 years, is it a challenge? I don't think so. It's a challenge as such, as a simple math, because we need to set aside from the banking somewhere around 100 billion a year. But as our national, as a policy stability target of credit growth around 12%, mandated by the monetary policy, which corresponds to around 500 to 600 billion of credit growth on an annual basis, 100 billion itself is over 15 to 20% of the total credit that needs to flow to the energy sector. So that's a big chunk now. Because if we really commit around 100 billion towards the energy sector, there will be a credit squeeze to other sectors, which are also the priorities. Again, the reason behind is like it's not only the energy that we are planning, or we are talking about energy that we are producing for, but again, the other agenda here is like, how do we scale up the consumption? So the moment we talk about scaling up the consumption, it also demands a significant credit for the assets to get created, which consumes the energy. So in this scenario, we are a kind of a fix that whether our national capital, whether it's a debt or equity, is enough to service the targeted, our energy plan. So maybe we need a serious thought like, shall we unfreeze our domestic capital and invite the foreign investors in this portfolio, facilitate them, and prioritize our capital fund, which is roughly around like 500 to 600 billion of liabilities that we source for, or like we encourage the foreign investments to come into this sector and like invest in the power sector. So I just want to give us a short snapshot of what NMB is doing in the power arena. We have almost like 45 projects that we have financed for, which corresponds to more than 600 megawatt of power. The central bank's directive for the direct lending on the energy sector is around 6% for now, where few banks are still struggling. We are 8.75% of our loan portfolio. Also, we are almost like 7% over towards the energy portfolio. In fact, just as our like strategic paper, we plan to reach around 15% by 2030 of the total credit books on the energy sector. So how are we doing that? So we're planning. In fact, like to reach that, last year we signed one of the foreign deals with one of the DFI, BII, where they committed around $25 million, which will be on lend towards the energy sector only. So there's a target projects. The NMB would be the bank who would be doing the projects, and BII would support on our balance sheet, whereby we will take that into the power projects. Not only that, now we need to scale up. That was more of a pilot project for the industry. So now to scale up that, one of the most important component that comes to foreign borrowing or foreign debt or equity, we talk about a hedging component. We recently done a small pilot deal with full NPRAs, very small, just 2 years. One of the biggest challenges is bringing that into a relatively longer kind of a tenor. So hedging would be one of the most challenging component for the banking industry to address for, which we have repeatedly discussed in various forums. In fact, for the last 2 days, probably the key takeaways of this forum is like, one is geopolitics, what builds the power export market, and what is the second most important thing to bring the financings from the international territory. It has been, like the hedging has been like, by almost all the speakers, they've said that hedging is one of the principal component that needs to be addressed for. So going forward, what we think as a banking fraternity, it's not that we don't have a capacity to inject around 100 billions a year, but since we have many priority sectors where if we invest everything in energy, it might create a credit squeeze. Now probably the time has come to scale up the energy market or the energy investments. Few products like infra, like which is globally accepted, like infra investment trusts, offshore bonds, primarily the clean bonds, with a platform to hedge would definitely bring the foreign capital for our necessary appetite. So having said this, the Nepalese banking industry, since it has displayed in the past, I'm very committed. As a fraternity speaking on behalf of the banking committee, we are committed and we are capable enough to deliver the annual requirements towards the energy. Whereas like one of the major issues pertaining to hedging, if it is addressed to bring the foreign capital with the new instruments in place, we can probably do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Srijasi. You rightly pointed out that Nepalese financial sector are able to finance some quantum of the investment, but we need to have international financing as well as, and the international financing can be direct and through the financial intermediaries. So obviously hedging is one of the stumbling blocks. So hopefully government of Nepal, Nepal Rashtra Bank will work on this issue shortly. So moving to Vidya Bharati Sikdel, who is representing private equity, managing director of Dolma Impact Fund. So the private sector has proven itself its instrumental role in the Nepalese energy sector, and based on the today's back data also, IPP generated 9,575 megawatt, and which is more than 50% of total quantum of the energy generation. For achieving the target of 15,000 megawatt by 2030, the private sector should be strengthened further. So private equity internationally has been playing a key role and crucial role by providing capital, expertise in the project development, operational risk management framework, sustainability consideration, and exit strategy. So these are the considered as a private equity injection in the development project. So in this context, how private equity firm can contribute to the growth and development of the power sector in Nepal and help meet the country's increasing energy demand while promoting sustainability and economic development. Over to you, Vidya sir.
Thank you, Ramza. Good afternoon. I'll go back to 2014 when we started Dolma Impact Fund 1 with $20 million. So this was a participation of 3 DFI investors, all from Europe. Private equity was really a new concept in Nepal. It was not even considered an asset class because there was no such things. The only closest thing that was available in the market was investment companies who invest in companies through the pooled capital that was collected. Now, 2023, Dolma Impact Fund itself is a $108 million fund, and there are a number of licenses that has been issued by SEBON, specialized investment fund licenses, and there are a number of private equity and venture capital funds coming into the market. So last 8 or 9 years, if we look into it, we have seen a lot of changes in the system. Thanks to the regulatory reforms from the central bank, SEBON, we have been able to trying to catch up with the international arena where a lot of investment in infrastructure and green energy projects have been partially financed by private equity or venture capitals. Why we need, in Dolma, we have also invested a total of 78.5 megawatts of clean energy, mostly hydropower projects, including a 5 megawatt of grid-connected solar power project. In addition to the financing that a private equity or an institutional capital provider provides, it also helps the entrepreneurs to deal with the complexity in risk management, ESG management, and a lot of accountability, governance in the system or in the company itself, which the entrepreneurs can actually replicate in the other companies or other projects that they look into. We have also learned a lot of lessons from the investments that we have made, and we have internalized a lot of these lessons in the investment process that we follow. We have tried to uncomplicate a lot of processes within ourselves, and also supported the entrepreneurs or the project developers to adhere into the best practices that would normally, they are not encouraged or they are not willing to adhere to in a general parlance. As Srijesh pointed out, for 100 billion rupees every year of bank finance that needs to be coming to this to develop the energy requirements that we are looking into, we are aspiring into, there is a 20 billion rupees of, at least a 20 billion rupees of equity shortfall that we need to cater into. And this needs to come from the system within. So foreign investment could be one of the major roles in bringing in those investments. There is globally, the private equity and venture capital market currently is under $4.75 trillion of AUM. And last year itself, in the South Asia region, close to $50 billion was invested in infrastructure and renewable energy projects. So there is a lot that we can tap into coming from the foreign private equity. So private equity as an asset class helps the entrepreneurs scale, and also the equity holders, these institutional equity holders support the entrepreneurs not only with the capital, but also the skills to manage the risk, ensure transparency and governance, so that there is a track record. For Nepal, we have not been fortunate to have a lot of transactions, so we do not have a proven track record of entry and exit in a lot of companies. So at Dolma, we are trying to pave a way so that we could actually bring in a lot of more interested investors who may not need to open up office in Nepal to invest in Nepal, especially in energy and infrastructure projects. So I think at the stage, what we are in the cusp of embarking a new journey where we believe that our energy development and the potential to export to India and Bangladesh would bring in and revolutionize the way that financial structuring is being done in the country, and also provide a reasonable and risk-adjusted return to the investors that join in. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidya sir. So I'd like to move to IFC, Mr. Jason Pelmore. South Asia is one of the fastest growing economy, and meeting this growing demand for the energy present both opportunity and challenges in terms of the investment in the energy infrastructure, capacity addition, and the energy security consideration. Nepal can be instrumental in energy transition and helping the right energy mix to the region, especially in the India and Bangladesh. And Bangladesh has been working hard to import power from Nepal for long, and very interestingly, it became one of the agenda for the party's manifesto for upcoming election also. Considering the energy integration in the region, multi-country engagement, involvement from the policy to project ideation to execution, engagement of the multilateral like IFC is always expected. And in this regard, World Bank Group has been working on regional energy connectivity. So in this context, what are some of the key trend, reality, challenges in the regional energy connectivity? And being the enabler and the catalyst for international investment, how do you see the regional energy market moving, and do it really help in bring international investment on the energy infrastructure? Over to you, sir.
So thank you very much for the question. I think a lot of ground has already been covered. It's great to be part of this panel because I think you've got the ecosystem, at least a significant portion of it, up on this stage. We've heard from the Honorable Minister of Finance. We are very grateful to have the Honorable Governor of the National Bank. And then we have the financial intermediaries, and actually most critically, we have a developer in the space. And I think we've heard the opportunity. There's an acknowledgement that Nepal is hydro-rich. There's an acknowledgement that there's still quite a bit of untapped potential. Finance is only one element of tapping that potential. Over the course of yesterday, my takeaway was that there's a need to broaden the market, and I think that's the theme, overall theme, and I couldn't agree more that Nepal right now is surplus capacity, not only in wet, but also in the dry season. So there's a need to do two things. One is to promote more trade, and that is both political, geopolitical, but also commercial, technical. And the World Bank Group is very well positioned to address some of these issues, and we are. We're active throughout South Asia. Some of the projects that you mentioned do originate in Nepal, but the end beneficiaries will be Nepal from a fiscal perspective, labor creation perspective, but the end users of the electricity could very well be sitting in India or Bangladesh or elsewhere. What excites us as well is the creation of a domestic market, which will also be the end users of this green energy. And so we've heard a bit about the opportunity for electric vehicles, but it's really about electrifying the economy. And this is another area where IFC is placing a great deal of emphasis, both from an infrastructure perspective, but also from a manufacturing perspective where IFC is also active. And then we come to the finance. And IFC has been a direct financier to hydro since the 90s. And we not only have the ability to directly finance projects, but up on this stage we have a client in the private equity space. And we have financial intermediaries also present where we can help provide liquidity, help provide technical advisory support to address ESG, environmental, social, and governance concerns, to promote more lending in this space. So it's about creating the ecosystem, but also making sure we have the right financial instruments to do so. I think we've heard from our colleagues at Urja, Banuji, where there's a need for new instruments to address the liquidity gap. And those instruments could include debt capital markets, the green bonds. Those instruments could include new hedging instruments, derivatives, but also increasing the availability of concessional finance to address some of the FX risk that was covered. And I'd also like to pause a bit on the request for more of a mezzanine product, because if financiers are being asked to take certain risks that don't lend themselves very well to a traditional debt instrument, meaning that they're higher risk and therefore the regulatory caps that are imposed may limit the ability of the commercial banks, may limit the ability of the multilaterals to provide that liquidity, then I think there is scope to look at how to create new instruments, hybrid instruments, that are not quite debt, perhaps are not common equity, but sit somewhere in between in the capital structure. And this is another area where IFC is very keen to engage to support local developers to bring up, to take to fruition their projects. And then I guess another element is working not only with domestic companies, which is a priority, but we've heard an appeal from the government to bring in more foreign direct investment. And this is another area where IFC obviously has a global network. We have the ability and local presence to help play that matchmaking role between domestic investors and the foreign strategic investors. So very excited about the opportunity. I think we're already very, very much engaged, but we would like to scale up our engagement across the spectrum, across the infrastructure, the financing, the manufacturing, the agri, and then working with all the partners in the room to achieve these objectives. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jason, for your insightful remarks and emphasizing on the alternative form of the investment, including blended finance, hybrid annuity, and integrated approach for the development of the energy sector in the region. So moving on to Anupa Rimal Lamichane, she is representing GCF, and I will be going on the basically availability of the green financing and related issue. So based on the IFC study, green finance has the potential to create a market of 46.1 billion by 2030 in Nepal. So considering the importance of the green financing in Nepal and the availability of the green project in Nepal, even Nepalese 5,000 hydropower project can help in achieving 20% target of the Bangladesh emission target, so which is 89 million metric ton. And as well as Climate Bond Initiative, the organization responsible for green bond certification, introduced climate bond standard, which include the hydropower and all type of the hydropower, either it is any size of the project and any part, any type of the project, either it is ROR, PROR or storage, that can be qualified as a green financing. But despite having the project, despite having the market and the policy, till now we are nowhere in the green financing map on the world. So in this context, what measures is the Green Climate Fund taking to increase the availability of green financing, and what are the some of the key challenges and recommendations in scaling up green financing in power sector? As well as, based on your experience in GCF, what are the major recommendations for entering Nepal on green financing map first and increasing the pie in that green financing map in future? Over to you, Anupaji.
Hello. Okay, I think this is working now. Thanks. Namaste to all, and thank you so much, Mr. Adhikari, Mr. Khatiwara, sorry, for providing us this opportunity, and in fact for the Green Climate Fund to participate in this forum. This is definitely a big pleasure for myself and my organization. It so happened that I was in Nepal and I was able to participate, and thanks to the IPAN team for us to invite on this panel. It's definitely a pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel as well. It's really interesting to hear what the challenges are and what things have been going on the ground and where possibly GCF can come in. I'm not 100% sure if all of you know what Green Climate Fund stands for. So the Green Climate Fund is a largest climate fund globally established under the United Nations Conventions of Climate Change. And this fund is purely connected to climate change impacts. So we are funding projects, capacity strengthening programs, focusing on climate change only. We do not do development. So any projects or any hydropower that wants to connect on climate change or wants to address the climate challenges, that is where we come in terms of capacity building, large investment projects, storage facilities, and all of that you have just mentioned. So now let me delve into your question. I have actually divided your question into three different parts. One is the measures, what we are taking. The second one is in terms of the challenges that the sector faces in terms of power infrastructure. And then moving on to what possibly Nepal can do in terms of increasing the pie. So in terms of the measures that we take, Green Climate Fund is very much a country-driven organization. We work directly with the government, and Ministry of Finance, in fact, is our partner in Nepal and the National Designated Authority. So when we work with Nepal, any projects that comes to the Green Climate Fund has to be agreed by the government, which means the Ministry of Finance. And obviously, partners work with Ministry of Finance and then reach out to us in terms of getting the projects. So that's one part. So while working on that, we look at different variations if you want to talk about green finance. We look at budgeting, like clean energy budgeting, clean energy planning, working on different kind of policies in order for the government to create that enabling environment for the private sector. So that's one. And number two is we work with local as well as international partners. We have a big team of accredited entities. So we work through accredited entities. Our funds only process or gets channeled through accredited entities. We have about 159 accredited entities globally, and two of them are in Nepal, which is NTNC and APC, who are accredited to the Green Climate Fund. And obviously international partners like IFC, World Bank, ADB, UN agencies are accredited to the Green Climate Fund. So which means any project that needs to get funded by the Green Climate Fund that has a narrative of climate change can definitely come to us. And then what do? We worked as a catalyzer. And in fact, GCF currently is in the second phase of replenishment right now. So we have already finished first two phases. We currently have a portfolio of $42.4 billion including co-financing. Our portfolio is very huge. And in order to work with countries, we work as a catalyzer, where we want to focus on high-impact, transformative, and innovative climate projects and business models. So definitely, if you are thinking out of the box, if you are thinking at large projects, we don't do small projects. We do, definitely, in terms of capacity building, which is focused on strengthening technical capacity, policies of the government, or regulatory barriers. For that, definitely a country gets 1 million per year per country. But apart from that, we do not have any other allocation per country, which means if there is a project that is needed for Nepal and is approved as part of the national determined contribution and a priority of the government, we can start talking about it with the accredited entity who can channel resources to the country. So having said that, I also want to highlight that we mobilize funds to scale through de-risking investments and unlocking local capital by providing long-term funding through equity, debt, guarantee, grants, structures, and concessionality where necessary. And I think I heard a lot during the panel discussion about debt and guarantee and new financial instruments that are needed for the country. And definitely, in this regard, the Green Climate Fund is actually pioneering, because we are a fund which does not only provide grants, but also looks at different kind of financial instruments. And in fact, we have started doing it already in so many countries. I have a lot of examples I can definitely share. As of now, until we have, starting from 2015 and the operation time, we have already approved 216 projects, out of which 61 projects are focused on energy projects. And there are some green financing projects as well, which are in Mongolia, in Africa, and others. And yes, everything is available on the website, but anyway, I'm available right now. Any questions you have, probably after the session, I'm happy to elaborate on that as well. So in terms of, now let's talk about challenges. What are the challenges that the country faces? What I've seen, based on my experience, I manage the Asia portfolio, which means I'm working with 24 countries in the region. And obviously, before that, I was working in Africa as well for some time. So looking at the developing aspect of what are the challenges, scaling up green financing and empowers infrastructure in particular can pose a number of challenges. So one of the challenges are limited availability of bankable projects. And we keep on facing this challenge again and again. Because when we look at bankable projects, we are trying to see what is the climate angle in the project. Because for us, as I mentioned earlier, we are a climate fund. So how can we make the project bankable? And that's where the government comes in, we come in, development financial institutions come in, and also obviously the development partners like IFC and others come in order to build in that capacity of that institution, and then look at how can we prepare a bankable project. The second one is high upfront costs. And as I mentioned earlier, we de-risk capital, capital at the start, and we take risk, and we use different kind of financial instruments. So this is something, again, that has been coming up in most of the developing countries. Limited capacity and expertise, I don't think I will have to talk about it. I think I heard most of you and the panel members mentioning that as well. Limited access to finance, that is the other barrier, and regulatory barriers, because this has to be looked at if you are looking at how to increase the green financing pie in the country in order to move forward. And for this, to scale up the power infrastructure, what requires is a multifaceted approach. You cannot just focus on one particular angle and say, okay, we will fix it. You need to obviously involve government institutions, have the right policies in place, as well as engage development financial institutions and private sector investment or private sector involvement. Private sector is key, and in Green Climate Fund, we have a private sector facility, because what we have realized is if you really want to focus on climate change or development, you have to engage private sector. You cannot keep private sector out of the equation. And that's very, very important. Now, let me talk about the last point or the last question that you had raised. What can Nepal do possibly what are the recommendations for Nepal to increase the green financing pie? I would say possibly, there are obviously a long list. I don't want to go through that. But possibly I'm talk about, based on my experience, is we should not forget the public sector. Public sector can play a very strong role in unlocking climate investments, because this is extremely important. And while we are doing that, I'm kind of going to put in 3 different baskets. So one is getting the climate policies right, strengthening the climate sector investment climate, and then strategically using limited budget. So moving on to getting the climate policies right. So when we talk about climate policies, what are we really focusing on? We're focusing on clear and consistent policies. What I've seen in the countries, I'm talking about not just Nepal, in developing countries, policies keep changing. And then private sector gets afraid to even come in. So what you really need is a very consistent and clear policy which stays on there for some time, so private sector is willing to take that plunge and come forward in making those investments. The other one is integrate NDCs like the National Determined Contribution document that Nepal has already prepared, and other documents into national planning strategies, because that's also extremely important. And then moving on to strengthening the private sector investment capital, create a robust environment, enabling environment for the private sector to come in and the private investments to come in, and reduce transaction costs and risks associated with PPPs, and introduce investment policies and incentives. And I think I heard that very clearly from the Honorable Minister mentioning that he is going to open those. And I think that's a really good example for Nepal, and probably you need to start looking into how those incentives could be planned and strategized. And then moving on to using limited budget. Using public funds to mobilize private sector funds is very important. I talked about that our portfolio is 42.4 billion. Believe me, it's not enough to really power the entire planet. We need a lot of money, and we need to really focus on development financing, domestic finances as well, which means public funds needs to be mobilized to catalyze private sector investments and international finance like the Green Climate Fund and others. And support the project development to mobilize private capital, design financial mechanisms to attract institutional incentives. I can share, as I mentioned, a couple of examples later, but right now, maybe I want to stop here and give the mic back to Mr. Khatiwadaji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anupaji, for sharing wonderful insight and remarks on the availability of the green financing and a certain recommendation for increasing our green financing pie. So, last but not least, we do have Namrata Mukherjee, DCOP USAID SARE program. So infrastructure project require the large upfront capital injection and government, because of the government constraint on the financing and the large quantum of infrastructures, so always we have to look on the different sort of the alternative financing arrangement, and even many countries have similar situation and move to the alternative financing approaches and innovated many instruments. So India is a good example which proved itself with the fastest growing infrastructure development using alternative financing and innovative instrument. So in this context, what are some of the most effective strategy for raising international capital to finance power project in Nepal, and what are some key challenges and recommendations that need to be addressed to attract more investment through alternative financing and the financial instrument? Over to you, Namrataji.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, distinguished delegates and speakers on the dais. At the outset, I'd like to thank the APAN team for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this esteemed panel. Mr. Moderator, sir, I have two constraints. The time is already in negative, and being the last panelist, there's always less of novelty left to touch upon points. But if you're okay, I will just focus on the strategies, because challenges have been covered by fellow panelists, and just focus on forward-looking ways. For me, I thought I'd focus more the narrative on how economic history of nations has led to this sort of consensus that whenever there is a need for attracting investments, and when you need to look at achieving your GDP targets, then it is inevitable that you have to focus on infrastructure growth, because that's what is actually very long-term in nature, and that's what requires immense amount of capital. So I think that's where every country is now really looking at focusing on. And the challenge over there is the capital-intensive nature of infrastructure projects and the long gestation period. And the fact that infrastructure projects require substantial amounts of continuous capital, which needs to be churned for any projects to have a continuity. Therefore, this requires robust policies and innovative financing and refinancing tools that can make sure that this churn of capital keeps happening for such projects. And I'm considering power sector as a key part of this infrastructure definition, if we look at it. If I just briefly touch upon in India, the banks have been dealing with hurdles such as non-performing assets as well as asset liability mismatch, which is really compelling the banking system to refrain from funding large infrastructure projects. However, being cognizant of this fact and the fact that we are all growing economies, right? The Indian government has been taking proactive measures and bringing in policy changes to attract foreign investments and private equity in the sector. And we can see similar trends happening in Nepal as well. And that's really, really encouraging to hear from this panel. So in this context, I mean, at the cost of being repetitive, but when I look at Nepal, I'll just take up the figures once again, which the panel said. You can consider it more as a summarizing of the numbers. But Nepal's investment requirements till 2030 to achieve its clean energy targets, we are considering an investment requirement of $46 billion, which will require an annual investment requirement of $5 billion every year. Our understanding is governments, DFIs, and financial institutions have committed investments of $20 billion already so far in the sector. So this is translating to a gap of roughly $26 billion with an annual gap of $3 billion, dollars. Now, if I just consider a simple math of 75% debt, the financing gaps only in terms of debt is around $2.2 billion, right? So I think there is, again, a consensus in this, at least panel, that besides conventional debt, mobilizing international investment becomes extremely imperative to bridge this gap, given the short time frames for mobilizing the amount of capital that we are looking at. So what could be some of the potential strategies to raise international capital? My colleagues have touched upon a lot of these points, but I will emphasize on 6 points. They may have some repetition, but just kindly be patient. The first point is creating an enabling environment for raising and attracting foreign capital. This was also touched upon by Honorable Minister, whereby essentially minimal tweaks in the existing regulatory framework, which is allowing existing instruments that is there in the financing sector to allow for international capital to come in. So an enabling framework is extremely important. Second thing that we have seen is for large power projects, infrastructure projects, the deepening of bond markets becomes very important. And therefore, we feel that the SEBON, the Security Exchange Board of Nepal, may consider establishing a green bond regulatory framework, because you will see most of the countries in the region are now moving towards green bonds, and hydro by its essential nature qualifies as that. What also we feel is capacity building of developers becomes very important, because while they may be a very innovative instrument, but if you don't know how to use it, how to access financing through it, so simultaneously there needs to be capacity building. And more important is also encouraging domestic investors to invest. I think that's also something which needs to be brought in within the system. So that's point number 2. Point number 3 is streamlining approvals and fast-tracking approvals. We also heard Honorable Minister talk about, at least for large infrastructure transmission projects, right? How can we fast-track approvals? And we know that the IBN is providing significant support in this regard for large infrastructure projects. But I also feel that FDI approvals for innovative instruments in Nepal, which already exists in the form of specialized investment funds, needs to be considered, because there are multiple approvals required for those funds. So that's point number 3. Point number 4 is, and we are very passionate about this, is really to create a regulatory framework for new instruments such as business trusts and infrastructure investment trusts. 8-9 years back in India, we had similar issues where we were not able to recycle capital for large transmission projects. It also holds true for hydro projects in particular. If this can be considered by the central bank here and SEBON, we are happy to help from India to bring in practitioners' experience of how they've benefited. And finally, 2 important points for crowding in capital, international capital. One point was touched by Anupa, which is increasing the bankability of projects through tight contractual obligations and offtake agreements. That is really, really critical. And finally, building a strong and robust pipeline of assets. The last 2 points, I just want to highlight that yesterday in one of our sessions, in fact, even in the inaugural session, USAID's, SAREP program, along with its previous SARI program, launched a regional platform, which is called the South Asia Forum for Energy Investments, SAFI, which we feel can be a very effective body, which can help in providing a facilitative platform for investors and developers, particularly in creating the bankable list of projects, because we are now moving more towards developing regional projects, particularly from Nepal's point of view. And from investors, when they look at projects, they look at a holistic approach. So they would want to come in, looking at the whole pipeline which is available for them. And a forum like South Asia Forum for Energy Investments can really play that facilitative role in putting together this pipeline of projects, building capacity of the whole set of stakeholders. So I'll rest here my case.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Namitaji, for your valuable insight and suggestion to bring the new and innovative financial instrument in Nepalese power sector. Is we have already overpassed by 9 minutes then given time, so I'll not be taking any question. Sorry for that. So you can catch up with our respected panelists in the launch time also. So first of all, thank you very much, respected Governor Sahab, for listening this whole session and giving your keynote speech, and the fellow panelists to have your wonderful remarks on your respective sector. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sadishaji.
Thank you very much to our session chair, to our keynote speaker, and to our moderator for this session. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I see most of you already rushing out for lunch, but thank you to the ones who are already staying back and respecting our panel. We had this poll which asked domestic capital availability is sufficient to fulfill 15,000 megawatt generation capacity addition. Yes, no, and maybe were the options, and the technical team is just sorting out how many votes we've gotten. I hope that all of you have participated in this. So 45 of you have said no, domestic capital availability in itself is not sufficient to fulfill 15,000 megawatt generation capacity addition. 7 of you are hopeful, the optimistic ones have said yes, and 5 of you have answered maybe. So we'd like to thank our panel for highlighting on the availability of financing for power projects in Nepal. We'd like to now invite on stage Mr. Ganesh Karki, Vice President of IPAN, to kindly present these token of appreciation to our panelists on stage. May I please invite the president of IPPAN then? I don't think we have Ganesh Karkiji available. We'd like to invite on stage Mr. Krishna Prasad Acharya, President of IPPAN, to kindly present this token of appreciation to our keynote speaker, Mr. Mahaprasad Adhikari, Governor, Nepal Rashtra Bank. Thank you very much, sir, for your presence in this Power Summit and specifically in this session, highlighting financing, resource mobilization, structuring, and investment in power projects. We'd also like to thank our moderator, Mr. Ramkrishna Khatiwada, CEO, Nepal Infrastructure Bank Limited. We'd also like to thank Mr. Bhanu Pokhrel, Group MD, Urja Developers Limited, for setting the context when it comes to availability of financing in Nepal. We'd also like to thank Mr. Srijesh Kimire, Chief Investment Officer of NMB Bank, where he highlighted and talked on the appetite that Nepalese banks have for project financing. We'd also like to thank Mr. Vidyabharati Sigdel for highlighting the role of bank in terms of private equity. We'd also like to thank Mr. Jason Pelma for his international perspective when it comes to energy markets. We'd also like to thank Ms. Anupa Rimal Lamichane, the Regional Manager, Asia Pacific Green Climate Fund, for highlighting the availability of green financing and the issues related to it. We'd also like to thank Ms. Namrata Mukherjee, Deputy Chief of Party, USAID, South Asia Regional Energy Partnership, for looking at the optimistic side when it comes to financing power projects. And with a group photograph, we would like to end this session with all our panelists and our president as well. Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists for this informative and enlightening session where we discussed on financing, how resource could be mobilized to the best of their abilities, structuring, and also investment in power projects. So thank you very much to our esteemed panelists, and thank you to our audience as well.
Welcome to Power Summit 2023.